I want to transition a little bit to your books because we have used them with our kids, the Wingfeather series, the saga.
Mike is looking for some like insights.
And I'm like, how?
He's very into
I'm going to
books,
say this,
yeah.
just from the books itself. Did you draw from your kids? You've got three
Actually,
kids.
Maybe for those people who aren't familiar with the books, Andrew, can you just explain the Wingfeather Saga just for our listeners who are like, what are you talking about?
I've heard this. Before you do that, I want to one quick thing. I've heard that it's like the mixing, or you have on there the mixing of Princess Bride and the Lord of the Rings. I think that's a pretty fair.
I think it's pretty fair. Yeah. If I could come close to either of those, I would be so happy. But yeah, I think that the idea is that it's a big epic story, and I want the stakes are high, and the characters are meant to feel real and round and human. And at the same time, though, there's a little bit of a wink that shows up every now and then in the story, which is, I think, what I loved about The Princess Bride is like it was really Monty Python and kind of goofy, but man, it was also really epic when it wanted to be. And so, yeah, that we were trying to think of ways to help people see what the flavor of this book is like, and that's what we came up with. But yeah, it's a 4-book fantasy series, adventure story about 3 kids who are basically find out that they're at the center of this great mystery, and that they've got to survive, and in doing so conquer the bad guy. So it's hard to talk about, because I remember Flannery O'Connor saying that, like, if I could tell you what the book was about, I wouldn't have had to write the book. So it's hard to as the author, it's hard to like say, well, here's the elevator pitch. But yeah, it's in the same camp as Harry Potter and Narnia and Lord of the Rings and The Princess Bride. How's that?
Okay.
So it's
yes.
Yeah.
I think you did it. That's a good elevator pitch. That sounded good.
Okay, great.
So I have to ask. So obviously you have 3 children. There's 3 characters. Were the characters in this story at all based on your own children? Did you have that in your mind?
Very loosely. Yeah. They were.
Okay.
Yeah, loosely. And I had to tell the kids, like, you guys were the launching off point, but like, don't identify too closely with these kids in the story, because the characters in the book really do take on a life of their own. They become their own, no matter, even if you start with, they for sure departed from any real personality traits that our kids had. I will say, however, there was some weirdly kind of prophetic things that happened with, like, Sky, my daughter, who Lily was loosely based on her, but Sky was only like 3 when I started these stories. The fact that the song maiden in the Wingfeather books would grow up to be this incredible songwriter who fights the darkness with her music is kind of crazy. And then Aiden, the oldest, is kind of, he's the one who just read constantly, so there's a lot of J.R.R. in him, as it turns out. And then Asher is this wonderful, hilarious, always hungry, just delightful human being. And so, yeah, there were these weird things that I was like, wow, it's weird that the kids grew into certain things. And I used to joke that if in my next book, all the kids are going to be doctors and lawyers and lottery winners.
All right, there you go.
That's for the grandkids version, right?
Yes. Good idea. There it is.
Yeah. Well, so because what I loved, I mean, one, our kids ate up all the humor, all the weird names that you came up with for stuff, for animals, the toothy cows and all of that. But there was this epic sense to it, as well as some deep, the line of truth about identity and them being lured and being not completely changed, but changed through sin, right? But that they could reclaim their identity, but their identity now became a superpower for them. I mean, there was just some great elements that were really masterfully done. And I felt like there were enough dad jokes to keep me happy for a long time. So, I really...
My pleasure. Yeah, I come by it honest. Thank you. I didn't... When I look back at the years that I was working on those books, because I would write a book and then the next year I would put out a record, and the next year it would be another book, and then there would be another record, touring constantly all between it. So it was a busy season, but I was working a lot of stuff out.
Wow.
With music, I can look at the record and it's like this very autobiographical artifact that sits out there and kind of reminds me, this is a snapshot of what God was doing in my heart during this season. And that's where these songs came from. And I can forget sometimes that the books do that too, in a pretty subtle way. But that idea of identity was something that I was dealing with. I was coming to understand the beauty of our belovedness. The fact that when we belong to Jesus, we're given this new name. Revelation talks about like there's a white stone, and on it there's this name written that only God knows, and this idea that our name is written on His hands, like all this kind of stuff, and so much of my personal struggle, like whatever sin you may talk about, is in some ways can be boiled down to this: I'm forgetting who I am, and the voice of the enemy is often trying to convince me that I'm something other than God's beloved. And it's the moments that I forget that, or I believe that I'm not His beloved, that are the moments that it becomes very easy to walk away, to convince yourself that maybe this thing that I'm desiring wrongly is going to be good for me, And so I wasn't sitting down going, how can I tell a story that will teach children about identity in Christ? That isn't what I was doing at all. But I can see that was what was stirring in me when the idea for the fangs came, the idea of these names. And so, like, I really want the story to be taken on its own terms first. And then you can kind of go, oh, yeah, there are these things that we can learn. Kind of like Lord of the Rings. Like, when I read Lord of the Rings, I'm just blown away by how much application there is to what's going on in our world right now.
Exactly, the layers.
Looking for believing that the power of the One Ring can save you. Like that kind of stuff. There's all these great, but Tolkien was adamant that look, this is not a metaphor. This is not an allegory. This is an imaginary history of this world first, and then you get to apply it to our world. And so it's very applicable, but it's not allegorical. And so I think I want the same thing for my books. Like, I want people to read it as a story, and then let the story do what it will.
When you say like you didn't write the story like to teach kids this, that, and the other thing, that it begs the question in my mind. So then what did bubble up to make you want to write this story? What was the
I just wanted to
what was it inside
I wanted
of
my
you?
kids to think I was cool.
That's what we all want, right?
Yeah.
Fair. That's fair.
No,
awesome.
I think it was a desire to, like I said, look under the hood of the car, get inside a story, try to fight my way through it, to understand how stories work. And it was the delight that I felt as a boy when I encountered certain movies or books. Like, there's just some, like, the butterflies in the stomach that I would feel when I was reading a really great, well-told story. Are just, it's just like, there's nothing like it. So I just wanted to contribute to the world in that way. I felt like I wanted to try my best to see if I could make something that would stir somebody's deep waters. But again, really believing that the Holy Spirit would use this in whatever way He would. But I had learned through songwriting that you have to hold that so loosely. You have to hold it with an open hand and trust Him to do with it what He will. So, for example, just a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I got an email that just made me sob. Jamie and I were at home a few weeks ago, and I got an email through my somebody tracked down the email address on the website, and it was this beautiful story about a man's father who was resistant to the gospel for his whole life. And he was this old guy who just read the Wingfeather books because his grandkids had read them, and he wanted to have something to talk about them with, talk to them about. And so he got to a scene in book 4 it was Janner in the Fane of Fire, when Kalmar gets to go into the Fane of Fire and Janner doesn't, and I'm trying to be vague on purpose so I don't want to split. And the guy in his email told me that his dad came out of the bedroom weeping and said that he wanted to follow Jesus after he read that section. Like, I could never have planned it,
Wow.
right? I could, that scene was not something that I was even thinking about. Could this be something that would, whatever? And it's still a little confusing to me that is the scene that did it. But it's just, it underscores the fact that, like, when a Christian makes art, we surrender it to the work of the Spirit. And the fact is, the Spirit uses art by non-Christians too, all the time, right? And so we just get to be like, he invites us to participate with him in that. And then we get to, like, sit there and eat our popcorn and watch what he's going to do.